Oh, this does still say half-brother Boone.
Really?
Yeah, on IMDb.
Part of me wondered if I had made that up. So I feel vindicated.
But then it's like describing the like first people that you meet. And I think this encompasses both parts of the premiere, but it says unfriendly, self-serving swindler and sociopath Sawyer. And I'm like, that's reaching.
Is it?
Sociopath? The rest of it I'm fine with. Sociopath feels a little far.
Hello, everybody. I'm Will.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is So I'm rewatching Lost, Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot, Part 1. I feel weird about this.
Why?
You're so excited.
I'm really excited. I have not touched this show since it ended.
Me either. Yeah. And I think it's I don't know what this is going to be like. I'm nervous because it's one of the things that it's like, I loved it when it was out and I held it in this really high regard, but I haven't really revisited it. Yeah. And also I think I'm at a place.
Have we outgrown it?
I don't think it's that, but I think I'm at a place like with Game of Thrones where I'm like, even though the first few seasons were good, I don't really feel like watching it again because like, where is it gonna like?
Because you know where it is.
I don't think it's as bad as Game of Thrones because I enjoyed tonally, like character based, where the show goes, but I just think a lot of it, and we're certainly committed to the first season, and we'll explain it as we go. Our MO is we try not to do big major spoilers in case you're watching it with us, but little things are probably going to sneak through. Yeah. And or we'll talk about sort of general
overarching themes.
And so I think the other issue.
Also, this was like appointment TV, so if you haven't watched Lost yet, are you really going to? And if not, why are you watching this?
Well, if you were younger when it was out and then you're going back because it's kind of iconic. And there's a lot to say about it. And that's sort of why I want to do this. But it's like I have since found out that they just lied the entire time.
Oh, the creators and the writers and everything,
That they just kept saying whatever ABC wanted to hear, and it just sort of, they lucked into it. Yeah. And I think that sort of tarnished my...
Well, sure. I mean, I think, again...
Because this is presented so deliberately.
It is, yes. There's so many aspects of this show throughout its entire run were presented very deliberately, and then when you get to the finale, you're like, but what about this 45-point list of things that you swore were important and now mean nothing, have no relevance at all? That stuff, I agree with you. It does tarnish it a little looking back, but I mean, we are only ever really guaranteeing we're doing the first season of these shows because we're trying to get into like a cycle where we like do season ones and then once we reach the end of our list, we'll maybe go back into the season 2. True Blood was an anomaly because we were having big fun. But
we still have only done the first two.
And so that's the other thing, too, is like, we might get to the end of season 1 and be like, no, that was like a slog. We're not going to do that again. But, you know, you never know.
Well, I stand by. I think as a character piece, as an ensemble, I think it's a really great show. Yeah. I think as like a mystery, it
leaves something to be desired. I think at a certain point, and this is another comparison with Game of Thrones, at a certain point, this show got so high on its own supply that it was just like, I feel like the writers were just like doing coke in the back and we're like, what about if this happens? And it's like, what if that happened? But then you have to go through to the end of that. I think that's the thing is I think they were trying to do so many things that they painted themselves into a corner multiple times, like multiple corners.
It's also so funny because if you know the actual story, what they told ABC they were getting from they told ABC that it was going to be a long-running scripted show that was going to be like sci-fi fantasy, but also grounded procedural that was going to have 2 timelines in each episode, and that you could come in or leave at any point and never like
they checked all of those boxes except the final one. You can't come in and leave whenever you desire.
That if you missed an episode, it was fine.
No,
and like,
that's a straight up lie.
And that's a place where I'm actually very interested in going ahead and watching this again and revisiting this, is because, and I'll give the caveat that, you know, this is when we were 18 and 19. So it's like our reality was changing.
So I didn't watch it till I was 21 when I moved here.
That's still.
Yeah, but you're right. Yeah.
That's still 18.
Yeah.
But the world, like the cultural, you know, consciousness, reality, all that was changing. And television in the 90s was procedurals and 3-camera sitcoms.
Yeah.
And we sort of started getting higher concept, serialized, because there's always been like serials were cheap.
Yeah.
It was like soap operas or comic strips or like, you know, cartoons or whatever. And to have these like big budget primetime soap opera, because it also was still, primetime was like the king at this point still, and it's not anymore.
Well, finish your point, because I have something to say.
That was kind of, this was one of, there was a handful of shows, and this was one of them that was really sort of like, it was the end of an era and also the beginning of an era.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say. It's just so weird because it was sort of, it lasted long enough to be like the first of its kind and also the last dying gasp of like the networks kind of. And it's just like, it's such a weird kind of experimental thing. And you're right. I think when you focus on it as like a character drama of like a lot of disparate personalities ending up on on this deserted island together and having to work together to accomplish anything, that is when it succeeds more than when you're doing the like mystery part.
And I think it all boils down to a single flaw, and I think the single flaw is that we were concretely promised answers.
Yeah.
I think if they hadn't done that and it was just sort of weird,
yeah,
we could have enjoyed it. But
like,
our mentality would have been different.
Every time Damon Lindelof did an interview, he was like, oh yeah, no, there's definitely all your questions are gonna be answered. And so now I'm like, who the fuck shot the boat? Like, like that's a season 4 spoiler, but still, it's like in my mind, I told Trevor on one of our Buffy podcasts, I was like, here's the thing though, if I'm ever in an elevator alone with him, I'm gonna stop that elevator and make him tell me who was on that boat. Like, it's gonna be
I think they just did it and we're like, we'll answer that later. I mean, it's similarly to my amateur experience with my whopping 1 self-published book. But remember when we were working on it's one of the reasons why I was like, we can't release this until it's done, because I wrote sheets for myself in Fairy Tale.
Yeah.
And I remember there's a handful of ones where you were like, what is this? It doesn't come back. And I was like, oh, that as I was writing it, I would be like, here will be a great place for
in case something needs to come back later. Yeah.
And so when we were cleaning it up, we went through and just removed them.
Yeah.
But when you're doing it in real time, I think the Who Shot the Boat was just sort of like maybe we'll come up with a good idea next year. Time for summer break. Like,
so okay, we have not even touched 1 ounce of the plot of the first episode, but like that's the kind of stuff that I going back to your first point, where I agree with you, where it is sort of like upsetting to go back, because it's just like, well, how many things just in the pilot happened that we were never going to get an answer for.
So there's a couple things that I did want to state. I actually, we should do research before we do this. That's not really, we're not like presenting like essays or like a respective or something. Like, so we don't do retrospective.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. It's largely just conversational. Yeah. But I remember reading, because at this time I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly, and I remember reading whatever CEO or some high up at ABC had greenlit this, Desperate Housewives, Brothers and Sisters. No,
that's
maybe.
ABC. Yeah,
Grey's Anatomy, and Boston Legal. It was like in one swoop, and it almost bankrupted the like network.
All of those shows, by the way, extremely successful.
Yeah,
even Brothers and Sisters, it ran for like 5
or even Boston
seasons.
Legal. I mean, it only went for 4 or 5 seasons, but still, it was like it was such a big bet.
Yeah.
And they fired him. And then they all were.
Yeah. They all went. They all went, and they went hard. This show went so hard. Like, if you didn't watch Lost, you didn't have anything to talk about at work the next day.
I was going to say, this is also, I think this was the last time that the must-see, or one of the last times.
Because Game of Thrones, definitely.
That was cable.
That's true.
That the must-see TV
the network
was
stuff,
network stuff, where people were tuning in at 8 o'clock, and there were commercial breaks, and there was all this stuff. Because when we'll get to it, but like when season 2 was airing, I was down here for college, and we had class Tuesday nights, so I had an iTunes season pass, so I could watch it that night.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because we didn't have a DVR, and Hulu was but a twinkle.
We also mentioned more than once while we were watching this that it's pre-HD.
It mostly looks okay, but there's like 5 shots of like the ocean. There's a shot of the ocean that looks terrible. There's 2 or 3 green screen shots at night, weirdly.
Yeah.
Usually
at night it works a little better.
But there's a shot of, I think it's Walt and Claire in front of the, like, I almost just said what it was, in front of the thing going through the trees.
Did anybody see that?
There is quite clearly some sort of beast. Yeah.
And Claire looks like a Nintendo video game. When she steps in, she has this halo around her. Yeah. But other than that, it looks pretty good. Like the all of the plane exploding stuff looks really good. Before we get
a lot of that's real.
Yeah, but like the explosions, there were like digital pieces of crap. Another fun thing is they do move the set halfway through this season, and it's because they had to move the set because where they were filming in Hawaii was visible from a highway.
It's like, I was reading the truth, it's 25 yards from a Hawaii highway.
And they kept getting 911 calls about a plane crash. And like,
I also read that because they had to ship it, the plane, they had to ship it to Hawaii, and they so it ended up at an airport. And the like people on incoming planes, like stewardesses and the pilots had to be like, please don't be alarmed.
Disregard
this is for a TV set. Like, don't worry.
Because didn't it also originate as a feature?
Well, I think that goes along with your like ABC's like executive thing, because I think they pitched it as like made for TV movie. The first 2 parts, I think they pitched it as a movie, kind of, because it cost as much as a movie, the first 2 episodes. But I don't know if it was originated as that. It was a lot of things for a while.
Yeah, because I think, well, I know as we go on, you'll notice this recurring theme. But they also were just sort of like adding people willy-nilly. Yeah. Because like, I forget who Maggie Grace read for somebody else.
She probably read for Kate because Evangeline Lilly didn't get cast until like literally the last minute, and her Canadian like work visa was way held up in red. She almost didn't make it to filming.
Because I remember Maggie had read for somebody else, and then they decided to write a part for her because Paris Hilton was so popular that they needed a Paris Hilton type. And that logic is evident through her entire character arc. And
it also did her character absolutely no favors.
And somehow made Boone's worse.
Yeah.
I really...
Justice for Shannon and Boone.
Yeah, I really love Jamie and Cersei. Oops, I mean Shannon and Boone. He gets better. He gets more than she does. He gets better material than she does. He doesn't get more material than she does. But I think that the potential of their characters outweighed what was actually given to them. But
especially when we get the like replacement Shannon and Boone. And I'm just like, this is worse.
So, having said all of that,
welcome to the episode.
this really is, in spite of like the criticism that we were just lobbing at them, this really is sort of a masterclass in setting the scene and introducing a lot of characters.
Yeah.
This is a large ensemble.
It is. And it only gets bigger.
And it feeds so much information to us, so much exposition to us in a not very exposition-y way.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you're being clobbered.
Well, none of these characters know each other.
Sure.
So they should be saying
but
these
they're
things to each other.
showing and not telling.
Also, yes, but even when they are telling, it doesn't matter because they don't know each other.
But to open up with the close-up of Jack in the woods. It's already immediately jarring.
Yeah.
You're sort of like, who is this? Where is this? What is happening? And then to have, because it's clearly a wilderness, and then to have him greeted by a lab.
A yellow lab.
A yellow lab is strange because that is a very domesticated animal. So where is this wilderness where there's also
a dog,
a pet?
Yeah.
And then the way that they layer the crash scene in, it really, really sells and builds the delirium and the chaos. You get Shannon screaming first.
Yeah.
Then you get the whirls of the machinery.
Yeah.
You get sort of like, and it's interesting because there are extras and like day players, but largely we're looking at the cast of characters, not really knowing who they are.
Yeah.
We clearly identify Jack as our hero. His hero complex.
Oh, brother.
From moment one, in a way that I didn't really pick up on. But it's like this entire beach is suddenly his responsibility.
Well, he is a doctor.
And a leader, but yeah.
And he, I mean, you know, I think watching it for the first time, you obviously don't get the hero complex, but because we know he's a doctor, we're like, maybe there are no other doctors on board. Someone needs to do something. If he's a doctor, then like he can help. But then obviously as the series goes, you're like, fucking Christ, dude, let someone else take care of something.
Well, if he stops for...
He'll die. He will die. Yeah.
And so we then meet Claire. I think Claire... Well, we see Charlie sort of dazedly wandering about. We meet Claire, pregnant woman, so there's an immediate... I mean, obviously, a giant flaming wreckage is immediate concern, but one person can't fix that in a way that one person can help a pregnant woman. And so we zero in on that, and the entire opening sequence sort of does that. It goes broad and then focuses, and broad and then focuses, and it allows you to sort of compartmentalize and dissect all of these things. And we get varying day players because we get Hurley, and it's like, Hurley, go help Claire. He's willing to, and he has a desire to. He's not very good at it though.
He's doing what he can.
Because he just takes her to a more dangerous part of the wreckage.
Well, I mean, Jack just says get her away from the fumes. No fumes on the other side?
It was very fumey. And also they're apparently both deaf.
Yeah.
And we have Boone giving it his all.
He's trying so hard.
And I, in that regard, I relate to Boone because it's like I have the desire to help and the want to be a hero, but I have a hard time seeing the forest for the trees. And so it's sort of like, give me a task and I'll do it well beyond
the Pence
effectiveness.
Thing is so charming because he's like giving a woman wrong CPR and Jack is like, you're doing it wrong.
Excuse you, Rose.
He is giving Rose. We don't know her name yet.
Somehow she's not a series regular That is wrong. That is weird. And she's a guest star the whole time.
I was going to say, I don't think she's...
That is L. Scott Caldwell. That is weird and wrong.
Incredible. So regardless, Ian Somerhalder is giving her wrong CPR, and Jack is like, you're giving her wrong CPR. And he's like, maybe
I don't know, dude. I'm a lifeguard.
I'm a lifeguard. Of course. And he's like, maybe we should do like a tracheotomy with like a pen or whatever. And Jack is like, you know what?
Well, he says maybe we should poke a hole in her throat.
I'm simplifying. So Jack is like, you are 100% right. Please go find me a pen. And then it's just like a hilarious cut to like the end of this trauma. And he has like a handful of pens. He's like,
I don't know which one will work best.
But
it's perfect.
But Jack says they're all great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Even though they're so well beyond that point.
Yeah, but it's like, it's great. I don't know. I love it.
We get glimpses of, we get propeller guy, or not propeller guy. The guy gets sucked into the engine.
Yeah. Today I was like, oh no, he died.
Then it like kind of exploded and the thing fell and they got Jack got Claire and Hurley out of there, yada yada.
I tell you, the amount of time, first of all, she's 8 months pregnant, so it's like mostly fine to give birth at that point. Like most things are where they need to be.
They think that they're only going to be here for a matter of hours today, so they don't want to have to deal with that.
Of course, yes, I understand, but she is like concerned that she's only 8 months pregnant. And I'm like,
oh. Well, also, Emily DeRaven is very young.
She is. Yeah.
She didn't register to me that young when I was also that age. Yeah. But
well, and I had already known her from
Roswell.
the show Roswell.
Well, if we're playing that game, I knew her from Beastmaster.
Oh, good for you.
She's got like blue and then like knots in her hair.
Oh boy.
She's like a demon in the jungle.
The point I was going to make is that she, like, falls on her stomach, like...
so hard on her stomach.
Approximately 70 times in this episode alone.
Once Sawyer has, like, secured the beach enough... Jack. Once Jack has secured the beach enough, he goes off quietly like a wounded animal. So...
Let's call it what it is, like a fucking bitch baby.
No. But he's got to be like
can see
alone with his man pain. He's got to be strong for the group. And then we get Evangeline Lilly. We're not going to focus. It's not really our brand to sort of like judge, jury, executioner. She's kind of
She's been doing
now.
A lot of anti-vaxxer stuff.
She runs her mouth.
Like, yeah.
This is that. We're not here to talk really about that.
I want to talk about Kate.
Because she's beautifully played, portrayed, captured. The show depicts her the entire show, but quite literally starting from moment one, like an animal. Mm-hmm. She is sort of like a doe or like a something, and she's sort of like leaping through the woods.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, can you help me? It's such a standard meet cute, but it feels very organic and it feels very electric. And
apparently that was their like chemistry test. That was the audition to see who would play Jack and Kate. Was that scene, the like stitching him up scene.
Well, and I just, because he has a gash that he needs help stitching up, and I just love because he then goes into this really captivating story.
I forgot that was in episode 1. I straight up forgot. I thought it was later. It's like, it's so like
visceral,
and evocative.
So much so that when Thanos takes the Soul Stone, every single time you say it's like that thing from Lost, because there's something about like something about like comparing a person's like it's a something sack with like nerves, and
it's like you're a nerve sac at the base of your spine,
and then they spill out like angel hair pasta. It's like and then to just have her be like, I don't know, if that were me, I would have like booked it for the door. And he's like, I don't know, you haven't now.
Yeah.
And that's just really very interesting and really very relatable, as it's endearing to the character and relatable as an audience member.
Yeah.
Because we all have these big illusions that we would do the noble thing, but then we have a fear that we wouldn't. And
or even the opposite. We sometimes are like, I could never do the hero thing. And then when you're in the situation, you somehow still manage.
But just to have him be like, to have him being the one who's being operated on, but he's still taking care of her.
Sure. Yeah.
It's very, like I said, I was watching this and I was like, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
We have an introduction to Walt and Michael.
Yep.
And I mean, it's very obvious that they're father and son, but just the way that the first line of dialogue is him making sure that his son is warm.
Yeah.
It's just, it conveys to us that he's able to care for.
Yeah. It's also Harold Perrineau is Michael, and we are introduced to him screaming Walt around the plane wreckage, which will be the only line of dialogue he speaks for the rest of this year.
This season. He gets some stuff.
Yeah.
We get that really abrasive scene with Sun and Jin. And it makes sense. Like, it's not, it alarms us.
Yeah.
But also the fact that they're Korean and speaking in Korean, it's sort of that reminder where, like, as an audience member, we started to be like, well, hey, you shouldn't talk to, that way. You shouldn't. But then you're like, well, maybe this is like a cultural thing that we don't.
Yeah, because it's also like, they're the only ones that speak Korean. They only speak Korean. They they're the only ones that can watch out for each other because no one else will understand, kind of thing. So it does put you back a little, but you're like, well, maybe I don't understand.
That's my point, is that it leaves you uncertain.
Yeah.
It leaves you unsure of what precisely is going on.
Yeah.
And you have nothing but questions where it's like, how are these people going to cope? Like, how are we going to deal moving forward? I think that's when the first night, I think that's when it becomes night. They build some bonfires. We meet Saeed and Charlie. So Saeed is also a leader, a natural leader and hero. And he starts giving Charlie, tasks.
Yeah.
They build a bonfire. People, they're hunkering down. There is a belief that any minute
someone's coming,
they should be rescued.
So like Hurley's passing out food. Shannon is refusing to eat because she'll eat on the rescue boat.
It's very abrasive, which I imagine was the intended goal. I wish that they had and I don't know if it's Maggie or if it's the direction or the writing. I wish they had leaned into comedy a little bit more. She has a petulance. She has this petulant side that I think, like, when he's trying to get her to eat the chocolate, I would rather, because she was like I'm gonna start eating chocolate now, and I'm like, okay, first of all, that girl, I understand the joke there. That girl eats chocolate,
of course.
If you want to make that joke, she should have been like, he should have said something to her about how, like, it's been blah, 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 since you've eaten, you need to eat something. And she should have been like, now, Boone, we both know I've gone longer periods of time not eating.
You're right. If you want to make the joke, you have to make it smartly. And, like, that's where I get to the point.
It also keeps her in a position of power.
100%. It also, you'll note that both before and after this, some of the writers have done mediocre stuff.
Is that your way of?
Oh. One of the writers did Buffy. A lot of bad episodes of Buffy.
And then Once Upon a Time.
And then we'll get there.
Well, and not for nothing, I think having a character in denial is interesting. And
but the thing is they were like, we need a bitchy, shitty character that everybody can, like, band together and hate as one. And I'm like, sure, make it the pretty blonde girl.
Well, and also because with a show like this, why isn't there more fucking on this island?
Oh my god.
Jack should stop debating and start ejaculating. Take advantage of what little time he's got.
With a show like this, you would think that you would want to have pawns.
Yeah.
Like, you would think that you would want to have Love Island, like a group of sexy, different, interesting singles sort of like moving around.
Which is like similar to the point that I made when like I forgot Claire has this like weird scrape on her chin the entire first season, and I was just sort of like, God, that's weird, because while I understand that that is a natural injury that could and would and probably does happen in plane accidents, I also was like, this is an island full of hot people who like don't like have anything else going now that they are stranded on this island. And from a like makeup department perspective, I'm sort of like, why didn't you give them like sexier wounds? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's very weird to me.
I think they mostly do a good job. But so anyways.
Well, Jacks are great. Yeah.
It's nighttime. And there is something, some creature, it seems, moving through the trees.
Just also felling the forest. Like, it's all coming down. Like, a lot of those trees are knocked over.
I knew they were moving, but you think that they're
They're moving really hard.
The thing about it, because the first place my mind goes is dinosaurs.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, so this is like Land of the Lost. But it doesn't sound like anything we've ever heard.
Yeah.
It sounds like an animal and a machine.
Yeah.
And it has this extremely iconic woo thing. That they caption it as a roar, but it goes, I don't know. It's very fascinating.
It is apparently a New York City taxi receipt machine.
I don't like that.
That's the noise they used. Yeah.
I'm sure they did things to it.
Well, of course, yes. That's the base
Every New York
noise.
City. Woo! And then it just sort of leaves, and everyone was like, that was weird. And so then the next day, they go to look for the cockpit because there might be a transceiver. And
It's Jack and Kate and Charlie. Yeah.
and again, the character, like, everything's character informing. And I mean, that's any pilot should be that way, but it doesn't feel clunky. Like, a lot of times you're like, you have to watch the pilot in order to get into it.
Yeah.
And this is one of the rare cases where we're like, would that we could go back to the pilot. Because I love that shot of Kate, of her going with Jack or wanting to go with Jack or him asking her, and then her stealing the shoes off of the dead man.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, she's not doing anything wrong by these standards.
It's still a tragedy.
But it's sort of, and the way that we marinate on it, the way that she does, the camera does, and then to have it witnessed by Locke.
Who we don't officially meet in this episode, but and then the orange thing, which I always...
Because he's sort of like staring at her,
Yeah.
but then he smiles and he has an orange peel in his mouth. And it's just even more off-putting.
Because I always remember, maybe because it's so off-putting, I always make my brain remember that he's doing it to Walt to like be silly, to like put a child at ease. But no, he's just menacing an adult woman.
And she reacts accordingly, and then he's like,
Yeah.
They go on their trek. We find out that Charlie
Is in a band.
However, it's sort of a washed up band.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And he takes every chance he can get to go, you all, everybody. You all, everybody.
I remember when we finally actually hear the song.
It's just like a punk song, right?
It's just sort of like a a late 90s. Yeah.
They find the front of the plane. The pilot is still alive.
Greg Grunberg, J.J. Abrams' best pal.
He explains to them that they were 6 hours into the flight. The radio went out. And so they turned around to go to, they tried to go to Fiji. Because they were going from Australia to
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Do you remember? I could not make that plane route make sense in my head because I was like, Australia's down here and Los Angeles is way over here. I was like, how did they crash near Fiji?
It's the problem with maps in the American public school system.
And I literally was sort of like, I think Jack like took my hands and was like,
yeah.
And I was like, oh.
Right across the Pacific
I couldn't
Ocean.
make that make sense for me for the entire first season. But I didn't follow it through to its conclusion.
Sure.
I have a lot of thought experiments that way, I guess. That was another fun thing. I didn't actually watch the season it aired. My mom did, though. And everybody was talking about it. It was all over MySpace in like the spring. And weirdly, Stefan was like obsessed with it.
Okay.
And we were like MySpace friends at that time. And he was like, you gotta watch Lost. And so it was like a Tuesday. I got off work, went to Best Buy because that's when they used to release stuff.
Yeah.
And I got the
DVD.
This was how I was gonna open the episode.
Oh.
I'll save this for part 2 because it's a 2-part pilot. I got the DVD and I just like plowed through it.
Because when I moved down here, I didn't have a job yet. And we watched like the first 2.5 seasons in like one sitting because you were like, you gotta watch it. We gotta watch it. And so I got caught up to like live. So I watched it live from like mid season 3 to the end, I think.
So the creature, whatever, comes back and brutally kills the pilot.
Yeah.
I feel like we get an explanation, or the creature's very inconsistent.
It's super inconsistent.
It's a great menace in the pilot, and then it's sort of like,
well, it pops up and back and around and shit.
It's absolutely interesting and it's absolutely creative, but I don't know that I think it's a slam dunk.
It's not a slam dunk. It's definitely not a slam dunk. I think that's mostly everybody. We get them all back at the beach again. We actually do get a little flashback with Jack and Rose to being on the plane. Her husband's in the bathroom, and then Charlie is like going straight for the cockpit or the front bathrooms, I guess, and then some flight attendants go after him, and then the plane goes bonkers and breaks apart. That is kind of all. We do know it is in 3 pieces, so the like...
Do we?
Yeah, because Kate was like, the front was gone and the tail was gone. So it's like they are in the middle part, and then the tail landed somewhere else, and the nose with the pilot was where it was. And Charlie is suspiciously absent for a few minutes in the cockpit, and then he comes back out.
Well, he was going to the bathroom.
We'll see.
Why do you think I go to the bathroom? Could you imagine?
This whole time? Oh, brother.
We did see Sawyer. We didn't really meet him, but we saw him being
smoking a cigarette, yeah.
Swashbuckling.
Well, that implies heroic.
No, and swarthy, scurvy. No,
he's not swarthy either.
No. He's like
he's
too cool for school.
Slinking.
Okay, fine.
Swaggering. Yeah, swaggering across the beach. He's smoking. That's all we get so far of him. And then there's a guy with a piece of shrapnel, and he can't take it out. So
I don't think that matters for long.
It sort of does.
Oh, okay.
In the next episode.
Well. Do.
Yeah.
And then there's the weirdly, interestingly, creatively, a lot of the percussion in the music is the plane.
It's like with the pieces. Yeah, it's very cool.
So, okay, well, we'll be back after episode 2.
Bye.